Hi, welcome to Conversations with Hannah. Today I am joined by Jason Palitsch, which many of you know as a Shrewsbury School Committee member and a very involved town individual. But today we're going to talk about you in your capacity as Executive Director at the 495 MetroWest Partnership, and Kristen, who many of you know as the Shrewsbury Assistant Town Manager. But today we're going to talk about your role as the Public Sector Co-Chair of the 495 MetroWest Partnership. And I'm assuming many people at home are saying, what the heck is the 495 MetroWest Partnership? So, Jason, you want to explain what it is?
Certainly. So, first of all, thank you for not only for having us here today, but also for your involvement and support of the 495 MetroWest Partnership over the years. As I'll talk about in just a little bit, one of the things that makes the partnership great, it is a unique collection of stakeholders, including our region's state legislative delegation, who are very active participants, and it really enhances a lot of the work that we're able to do. So what is the 495 MetroWest Partnership? Kind of a mouthful of an official name,
yes.
Frequently confused with similarly named organizations. The 495 MetroWest Partnership is an organization that is focused on supporting sustainable economic growth in the 36 municipality region that we call 495 MetroWest. If you're thinking of a map, I like to call us the diamond to the west of Boston. So all the way to the top is Westford. It comes down west to Shrewsbury and Grafton. It goes all the way down to Foxborough and then up to Natick and Wayland. The region is home to about 1 in 10 residents in the Commonwealth, 1 in 10 businesses. It's grown quite a bit in recent generations. It continues to grow at a rate faster than the state's population, and that's actually saying quite a bit. You look at the 2020 census, the state's population growth overall was pretty impressive. So what the 495 MetroWest Partnership does is we try to encourage, promote, and support sustainable economic growth within this region. We are an alliance of a couple of different relevant stakeholders. Businesses, of course, first and foremost, but also municipalities, developers, environmental organizations, higher education institutions, chambers of commerce, regional transit authorities, members of our region's state legislative delegation, folks that you don't always see around the same table, coming around the same table to advance the interests of our unique region.
And the genesis of the partnership really came out of an awareness that we weren't collectively using all of the power that we had as independent groups and then as legislators, as businesses, as municipalities for the region. And so I think it was 2003 when the legislation was put through to authorize us to be created as the partnership.
We were actually a merger of 3 distinct organizations that, kind of sat around together in 2001, 2002, and they had a feasibility study conducted. And it was, about the future of these 3 organizations, but it was also about the region overall. And the essential question is, everybody had recognized by that point 495 was growing fast. It had been growing fast for a while, but it still lacked for its own cohesive voice. It was frequently getting lost in policy conversations between Boston and Worcester. If you think of the communities that I just described, and in fact, if you think of our hometown here in Shrewsbury,
right,
we are frequently described as being parts of different regions. We are Metro Boston, we are Central Massachusetts, we are MetroWest, we are 495. And one of the interesting things about the particularly unique collection of 36 cities and towns the partnership has is any other jurisdictional boundary you can think of, they're divided. They're divided by county. They're divided by congressional district. Metropolitan planning organizations, which, a lot of policy nerds will know is where a lot of resource allocation decisions get made. We're split between 4, actually, the largest of which is MAPC, CMRPC. We're split between Chamber of Commerce, River Watershed, Regional Transit Authority. These 36 cities and towns have so much common interest, but any other avenue where decisions were getting made, they were divided. And that is sort of what has proven to be the enduring value of the organization over the years.
Well, and I think, part of it was, too, that, some people said, well, you have these chambers of commerce. Like, isn't that what this is going to be? And in the beginning, there was a little bit of trepidation by some of the chambers, thinking that the role was going to be duplicative. But it's actually a very distinct role. And, one of the ways I explain it, being a member of the delegation, is chambers typically don't do a lot of policy advocacy to me in my role. But the role of the 495 MetroWest Partnership is very much focused on policy and things that are going to make a difference in the region, whether or not that's from a budgetary perspective or bond bills and things that are necessary, down to actual policy, legislative related things. And that's why having everyone at the table and thinking about these issues is so important. And that's what the convening nature of the 495 MetroWest Partnership sort of separates it from. And also, it's not done for the benefit of necessarily growing a business per se, although certainly we want economic growth and we want business growth in the region. But it's really done on a more macro level to make sure the region as a whole has a voice in the conversations that are going on in the State House. as well as bringing some of these issues to a broader group of people. I find a lot of times things that we're talking about at the State House and things that we might be talking about together, which we think are so critical, are not largely known outside a small circle of people, but they will be hugely impactful. And
Alston multimodal.
Exactly.
Which we'll talk about in a little bit, I'm sure.
Yep. And I think, too, the other piece of it is, on the municipal side, municipalities have a lot of the same issues and are trying to think through, how do we address water resource issues? What do we think about housing and how to have increased housing? And instead of doing it sort of one-off, the partnership enables those conversations to all occur at once. And you've been really involved in the partnership for a long period of time, too, and seen it change, yes. I think, a lot.
Yeah, I've actually been involved in the partnership since 2004 on the private side, and then when I came to Shrewsbury in 2010, continued to go to those subcommittee meetings, and most recently have been appointed to the public sector co-chair of the board and sit as the public sector co-chair of the Energy and Sustainability Committee. So I get to see it on all different levels, and the town of Shrewsbury really benefits from having our membership in the partnership.
And for us as a town, and certainly thinking about it in a role as a finance committee member, this is an incredibly powerful return on investment. I think it's still at $500.
$500 a year.
Yeah, I'm sure Jason would like to have it as more, but
it's a steal. Absolutely,
it really is. And I think we've been fortunate in that we've always had, I think, strong representation in the partnership. I remember Henry Fitzgerald was very involved when he was on the board.
Yes.
And so, we understand the value here, and I think the members of the community, I think originally it was 32 members, and then it has grown by
32 cities and towns,
time.
Most recently to Plainville.
Yep.
But, the point you hit on earlier about, how we work with chambers of commerce, it's an important point. And, we're often confused for a chamber. We do some similar work. But one of the things that makes the partnership unique as well is sort of how we approach economic development and economic growth. It's holistic. We do some of what you might consider to be traditional economic development work. We do site selection and retention. If there's a large employer that's looking at the region, we help attract them to the area, help find a suitable site. If somebody in the region is looking to grow, fund just this week, actually, there's a cookie company in Blackstone Valley that is hunting for a couple thousand square feet of industrial space, and we've given them a couple of options in 495 MetroWest to take a look at, including one in Shrewsbury. Right. We don't always get to deal with cookies on a day-to-day basis, but helping companies identify resources, connecting them with municipal governments. So that's sort of what you think of as traditional economic development. But what the partnership has always recognized is what really supports economic growth is the people who are here. This is a highly skilled, highly educated workforce. A lot of industries, a lot of companies, especially life sciences, technology, biotechnology, they want to locate here because they want to be here. They want to be in this climate, this culture. They want to hire the people who work here. And that really underscores how all of these different issues that we work in, transportation, housing, water resources, all of these things impact economic growth. We don't, when we're involved in policy, we don't get involved just for the sake of policy.
Right.
The issues we deal with are all interesting, but we're not doing them for their own sake. We talk about housing, transportation, and water because those things are all essential to support economic growth. We know, for example, life sciences companies have higher water usage needs than for classic office space, and a community's water resource issues can directly impact their economic growth. So that's another thing that's, as you mentioned, has always sort of set the partnership aside, is we are focused on economic growth through a holistic lens.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's true. And I think, it's probably helpful to articulate some of the ways in which Shrewsbury has benefited from the partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. I would think most recently we've had several industrial developers within the town of Shrewsbury go through permitting, and with the help of Jason and his team, the Energy and Sustainability Department committee actually put on a forum and a workshop to understand what does the 21st century warehouse industrial legacy look like compared to what it looked like before. We actually were just afforded $25,000 in redo funding through the 495 MetroWest partnership to do a facade improvement program to understand how to help our small businesses upgrade their facades and hopefully apply for future funding there, as well as just general networking. We really get to know businesses. We get to know other municipalities. We get to know more delegation throughout the region. And really, myself as the chair, I really get to showcase Shrewsbury, which I am so excited about, that Shrewsbury has that place on the board, and we really can put Shrewsbury on the map for MetroWest.
It is funny walking into one of the meetings because Shrewsbury is always well represented in the...
Yes.
And I think, the office is in Westboro, which is also, nice for us in terms
Yes.
of getting to the meetings, although,
We
we're
can
finally
actually
getting back
see
in person.
495-9 interchange
Yes.
from our offices,
Right.
which I enjoy.
And I think, that's an example of where, people can probably find something familiar. The challenges around transportation, the 495-90 interchange, that is, the work is going to be coming shortly. We're finally getting there in terms of having the design done and moving ahead. But that has been a long time coming. And years ago, the 495 MetroWest partnership did sort of the top 10 worst intersections and
Traffic nightmares.
Traffic nightmares,
Yes.
they
I
call
was
it.
on that
Yes.
committee.
Yes.
Yes.
And, everything in transportation and planning takes a long time anyways. But we're seeing that list of things that were identified are being worked through. The intersection of Route 9 and Lyman Street, which just was refinished a while back. That was one of the things that was articulated. And so the work that we do to figure out, where do we have a common goal of seeing improvement, and how do we start that advocacy effort? And again, it's always typically a long-term effort. A lot of what we're doing isn't short-term, 3 months and we're going to be done with this. It is a years-long effort.
And, 495-90, my predecessor, Paul Matthews, I found letters from him on this topic going back over 10 years, to your point. That was a decade's worth of very aggressive advocacy, oftentimes led by the 495 MetroWest partnership. Just got a status update from Mass DOT last week. Obviously, it's getting to the phase where there's project rumors, so I got a lot of people coming to me, have you heard this, have you heard that? So just got the update from Mass DOT last week. They are still scheduled to move ahead with construction starting summer 2022. And though that's going to be, a long project to make happen and to finish, I think everyone who's come home to Shrewsbury from Boston on the Pike, who's done that weaving through 495, has a really well-honed sense of just how dangerous that intersection was. But that was a decade worth of advocacy to bring that project to fruition. And, we have other things we need to keep our eye on, obviously closer to home. There's 495-9 just up the road that, we need to talk about. And the partnership has started to be putting that on the radar screen for longer-term funding sources. 290 and 495, which has had some improvement in that interchange done, but it still has another phase of that project. But the one that I think is king of them all, when I first started in this role, I think one of the first conversations that I had with Representative Kane was Alston Multimodal, and how to so many folks that term Alston Multimodal is almost meaningless, and it is a big dig level event. For those who are watching at home who don't know what Alston Multimodal refers to, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is going to soon have to replace the viaduct on the Massachusetts Turnpike that weaves the pike into Boston through the Alston neighborhood. And right at that point, it's not just the Turnpike, it's rail, which is commuter rail and other rail infrastructure. It's going to be a decade-long project, and we as a region, even though it's ostensibly a Boston project, it's going to have direct impact on commuters who live in this region, the ability of people to get on the road, the ability of people to get off the road and to go onto the train. Freight, so much freight moves up and down the pike in 495. The impact that project, that for a lot of folks is just not on their radar screen, is going to have on our region is astronomical.
It is, and there has been an incredibly long period of work on it already, and we're still not even to the point where we have an actual thought on what the preferred alternative. We just got there in terms of what we think we want to do, but it's still not 100% ironed out. But to your earlier point, Jason, it involves not just the viaduct, and it involves straightening the road so that instead of sort of making that big swoop that you do today when you come in and go by BU, it would be straightening the road out. And so it would free up all of that development there, which is mostly owned by Harvard University, but is a prime location for increased economic activity, and certainly, especially in the life sciences as well, because Cambridge is pretty much all set now. They don't have a lot more space. And then, Storrow Drive is there as well, and you have the Charles River. And all three of those things, along with the rail, trying to fit everything in that very narrow area called the Throat, is almost impossible.
With a new rail station.
With a new rail station. And so, the work is complex and the advocacy is long, but it's having a partner who can be at the table the full time, who can help make sure that the region out here is not being lost in all of the efforts that are being focused there, because this is going to be an 8 to 10 year construction period, which means an incredibly long period of time for people to have to commute through and deal with this. On top of the fact, and we've been trying to push the 495-90 job to get started so that could be further along, so that you're not trying to go through the 495-90 interchange work and then, go for a short distance and then have to start with the Alston Multimodal. And so we really look at it from, if somebody's leaving their house here and they need to commute to Boston, how do we make sure that we're helping in that effort. Because a lot of times, particularly in transportation, people look at just the thing that they're doing, and they don't consider the actual, commuter that has to go through all of that to get to their final destination.
And it's easy to look at Alston Multimodal as a Boston-based project because
Right.
it has huge consequences for the neighborhood that it's in, and to pay attention to the conversations around that project so far. They're very, and rightly so, Boston-centric. But during the 8 to 10 years of construction, we have to be asking questions for 495 MetroWest. How long are lanes going to be shut down on the Pike? When is commuter rail service going to be reduced? Can we schedule those so that those two things do not conflict? What other MetroWest specific mitigation strategies do we have in place here? None of our 36 communities are served by MBTA bus or subway. You get closer to Boston and there's other elements of the public transportation
Right.
conversation, and for us it is commuter rail and roadways. And even for residents who, say, you know what, there's a lot of construction, I want to get out of my car, I want to be a little bit more green, I'll get on the train. We need to pay attention to what's happening to their commutes as well.
Right.
And I think something else that Rep. Kane has been instrumental in helping with at the state level and the partnership at their level is the parking locations at the Grafton and Westboro MBTA stations. We've seen obviously a huge downtick in that, but I
Right.
think that will be another item that we focus on at the partnership level and the state level, especially with this project coming to fruition.
Yeah, certainly. And, we were very close to having the expansion in Westboro, and then the pandemic hit, and so that got put on hold. And we're trying to now get that back in line and to get that moving. We were able to add some stripes out on the parkway so that people could park there. The one good thing about the pandemic from a transportation perspective is one of the challenges thinking about people commuting for 8 to 10 years through the Alston project was trying to convince businesses to have flex schedules, if they're, most businesses were like, yeah, that's not us. We can't do that, or people need to be here. Well, with the pandemic and everyone relearning that you actually don't have to be in a physical office space in downtown Boston every day should help us a bit when we go through this process to provide some more flexibility. And I think, too, on the employee side, realizing you don't have to spend your life in a car to get to a job downtown was an important learning. And also for us, we're always trying to recruit the businesses out here as well. So we want the economic growth. So I think, not that anyone ever wanted a pandemic, but the small silver linings that have come out of it, that's certainly one of them as this project moves forward.
Absolutely.
And, oddly enough, with commuter rail ridership down so much due largely to the pandemic, it is coming back. And frankly, MBTA has been surprised that it's coming back faster than they expected. One of the issues on commuter rail that the partnership had been working on for years, which is now, ironically, again, in part due to the pandemic, is now a reality, is improved scheduling. One of the issues we've been talking about for years with commuter rail is, it's an older system and it was set up for a very 20th century idea of commuting. The people in the suburbs would take the train in to the central city for their office job or whatever their job was, and then they take the train home at night. And the scheduling was largely set up around that. So if you had childcare, or if you cared for an elderly relative and you needed to think about your ability to get home in the middle of the day on short notice, the commuter rail largely didn't seem like an attractive option. Midday service was very limited. There's now clock-based scheduling. It is now a system where you could conceivably hop on a train within the hour at any point during the day, obviously excluding the dead of night. That's going to start drawing people more back on. But when we get to that, we need to go back to the issues of being able to park at the station. We need to deal with the heights of the platforms at the various stations. And of course, as Representative Kane knows, it's a very old fleet of trains with a lot of breakdowns. We had mostly because of the weather, we had 2 track breaks on, I want to say, Tuesday this week because of shifts in weather that had the whole Framingham-Worcester line down to 2 tracks. And those are sort of the things that the partnership also keeps an eye on behalf of the region. We can't be having those problems as we want to get people back onto the train.
That's for sure. And that sort of leads to the work that we have done over the course of the fall, which was around an updated strategic plan. And, sometimes we're so busy doing the work that we know we need to do that you don't realize that you need to step back and sort of reframe it. And Jason, when you were hired to this job, that was one of the things that you had remarked on early on, that the strategic plan was very old, and that it really didn't.
2008.
Yeah, it didn't guide you in your work, and that you also need it, certainly for the board and the executive steering committee, to be centered on, here is what it is that we're up to. And so why don't you walk us through how we undertook that process together?
Absolutely.
Do you want me to get it?
Please
I'll
kick us off.
kick it off.
Yes.
It's my baby, and it's coming to fruition with our March board meeting, which I'm very excited about. But as Representative Kane alluded to, the partnership had a strategic plan most recently in 2008. All the goals were benchmarked to 2011. My predecessor, before he ended up accepting another position, was starting a new strategic planning process. And when I came in, I said, this is going to be one of our first things to do. Well, little did I know that within, I think, maybe 4 weeks of me starting the role, we had the pandemic, and there was a period of time early in the pandemic where it just was not a good moment to be making long-term plans. Think of early in the pandemic, we didn't know what was going to happen next week.
Right.
But as things started to settle down, we began working with a consultant who actually lives in our service region. She lives in Acton and has helped a lot of MetroWest organizations to sort of crystallize what value we bring, who we are, what we do, and clarify that. The partnership is actually we've talked about a lot of different things we do just in this brief amount of time. The partnership is held in very high regard by those folks who know who the organization is. Most of the public does not know who we are. Those who do know who the partnership is had come to develop different expectations. Businesses thought of us kind of as a chamber of commerce. Municipal governments tended to think of us almost like a planning agency. We had different audiences thinking different things. And fun fact, we're actually only 2 full-time people. We have a volunteer board of about 80 people. It's about 50 voting members and about 30 advisory, which obviously Kristen is a leader on. And that volunteer board is an endless font of resources for us, but it's me, one additional full-time employee, and sometimes a co-op student from Northeastern University. And so when the mission is big, but the resources are small, we have to be very clear on what the strategy is because we have to maximize those resources. So not to go too far down in the weeds, but we have a 5-point strategic plan, the first point of which focuses on improving our organizational efficiency, and that involves improving how we communicate about who we are and what we do to a wider audience, especially the business community. But then also things we need to do on behalf of the region under transportation, housing, workforce development. In a big sort of behemoth of a category we call built and natural resources, which includes everything from water resources, energy, sustainable development, maintaining the natural resources that make this area an attractive place to live and work. So very excited about that plan. It is actually now available online at 495partnership.org. You can click under the About Us tab. There's a strategic plan page, and you can read all about the process, who participated in it. I want to thank Representative Kane for her participation in our 12-member strategic planning committee, but that will be coming before our board of directors in March, and that's a great sort of 5-year outlook for who we are, what we're doing, and where the region needs to go.
Yeah, I thought it was a good process, and I thought there was a good group of people who were part of it, and certainly your leadership, Kristen, on the partnership, I think has been really critical, and you're somebody who I think a lot of people turn to listen to, like when there's a chance, to have an opinion on something. Again, it's also a very respectful organization, which I've always appreciated. You come together and you have a lot of different sort of, you might have a different opinion because of where you sit in the world or what your organization is, but the dialogue that occurs, I have always found to be really helpful. And one of the reasons I always try and prioritize attending the meetings is because I also want to make sure that what is going on at the State House is represented in the conversation, and that I can also take what I'm hearing back, because I do think that's a piece of the puzzle. But as somebody who's in leadership in the town, how have you found the process to be sort of overall, just as a member of the organization, but then also in your role as a leadership?
Sure. So I was grateful enough to be able to sit on the strategic planning committee for the 495 MetroWest partnership. I learned something new every single time I sat in a meeting, heard others' perspectives. The facilitators were excellent. We had wonderful board participation. And what I found fascinating is that now we all have a unified voice, that when we're talking to someone on the sidewalk or in a meeting, we all say the same message about the 495 MetroWest partnership. And that's really exciting because I would find myself kind of stumbling, as Jason said, we kind of do this, but now it's all unified. And what's equally important and really exciting is that Shrewsbury is embarking on their first strategic plan through the Board of Selectmen and the community as a whole. And I really have used this experience sitting on the 495 MetroWest Partnership Board strategic planning process to inform how we will be approaching this with the town of Shrewsbury and collecting those community voices and moving Shrewsbury into the next phase as well for our 2030 plan.
That's great. And again, I think that what's funny is the $500 that we as a town pay to the partnership. I think we give, those of us who also either work in the town or for the town, give such a multiple of that to the partnership because there's such value to it. It is a completely necessary organization to have here. And I think part of our job in the strategic planning process was to also make sure that others were aware of that. Because again, it can be a small universe who understands the value, but the large universe is benefiting from it. And we want to keep what municipalities pay to support the organization low. But we also need the business community to invest. And I think part of what we've been able to do is articulate clearly what the value is. You want us sitting at the table and having input on what's happening at the Alston Multimodal Project. You want us sitting which we've been doing for a very long period of time as part of the partnership, thinking about the commuter rail schedule and how to make that better for those of us out here who would like to use that, how to improve the parking. The water resource discussion that has occurred over many years is certainly water's always been an issue for us here in Shrewsbury.
Yes.
So, it's we invest our time in it because we get so much back out of it as a municipality. And I think now we have the opportunity to make sure that the business community understands that value as well and steps up and starts to invest more. I mean, that is where the growth opportunity is, so that it perhaps isn't two individuals sitting at the partnership, but we can support the work that we can do and we need to do here with a sustainable revenue source that allows for the proper organization to exist, capacity.
And of course, as you alluded to, and we call our business supporters investors, and they are the primary source of revenue for the partnership. And, that's something that we've sort of streamlined the process a little bit about how we speak with our investors. But when I first came in, I made a priority to speak with investor businesses. And one of the things that I found about the partnership that was sort of really inspiring, and I think continues to this day, is we have investor benefits. If you invest at certain levels, there are things that come with that, recognition and the logo on the website and so forth. But our investors, especially our larger investors, were not gravitating towards us for those reasons. All of our investor representatives, which are presidents and CEOs, vice presidents, government affairs folks, said some version of they support the 495 MetroWest partnership because they see the value their company is getting out of it. You think of other organizations where a company might pay to join. It's like, okay, you pay this, get this, and that's why the check is cut. The businesses that support the 495 MetroWest partnership have seen in the work that the organization does something that they feel is important to support their business and to support its future prospects in 495 MetroWest, and that's been really inspiring.
Well, I'm grateful to have both of you in leadership positions at the partnership, and I enjoy the opportunity to be able to work together in that capacity as well as the many others that we find ourselves working in. And I'm really excited about the future of the partnership. And I think, the people that are a part of it are really a testament to seeing the value. And we have a lot of challenges to work through over the next few years together around our central tenets of transportation and housing and water resources and energy and sustainability. So the work will certainly endure. But we are miraculously at the end of our time together. It always goes so quickly. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for all your work you do, Kristen, in all your different hats. And to you too, Jason. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to work together on an almost daily basis, it seems like at times, depending on what's going on at the partnership. And I'm looking forward to a bright future for all of us in this MetroWest area.
Thanks for your support of the partnership and the entire delegation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And thank you for having us today. We're excited to talk about it.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us on this episode of Conversations with Hannah. Last note, the State House is opening on Tuesday, February 22nd. We're the last state in the country to reopen a State House. I'm very excited to have it open. And the future, I think, is getting brighter for all of us these days. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.